Under the freezing snow, a 18-year-old trudged back toward the overcrowded foster home, cold, hungry, and exhausted. At his lowest moment, he found the wallet of a wealthy elderly woman with more than $4,500 inside, enough to feed him and every child in the shelter for an entire week. Yet even when faced with such a huge temptation, he chose honesty and returned the wallet to the old woman. What he didn't know was that this simple act would lead him into a new future he had never dared to imagine. Before we go back, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The snow came down in sheets, turning Detroit's downtown into a frozen maze. 18-year-old Daniel Thompson pulled his threadbare jacket tighter, but the cold had already seeped through to his bones. The zipper had broken weeks ago, and there was no money to replace it. There never was. Beside him, the wind howled through the canyon of glass towers, each one glowing with warmth he'd never know. Through the lobby windows, he could see people in expensive suits, laughing over coffee, their lives so far removed from his own, they might as well have been on different planets. Daniel's stomach cramped with hunger. Lunch at Riverside House had been 3 hours ago. A thin slice of bread with peanut butter, shared between 18 kids who all needed more. His portion had been even smaller because he'd given half to little Emma, who was only 6 and cried herself to sleep most nights. His hands were numb. He shoved them deeper into his pockets, but there was a hole in the left one, and his fingers just pushed through to the frigid air outside. He'd been meaning to fix that hole for weeks, but thread cost money, and money was something he didn't have. Everything cost money. Existing cost money, and Daniel was running out of time. In a few months he'd age out of the system, he'd be on his own. No support, no safety net. No family to fall back on, just him and whatever he could scrape together before that deadline arrived like a guillotine. The thought kept him awake most nights, panic rising in his chest as he calculated and recalculated how he'd survive, where he'd go, what would happen when the only home he had disappeared. Just gotta make it back, he muttered to himself, pushing forward through the storm. That's when he saw her. An older white woman, maybe 75 or more, stood on the corner ahead. Everything about her screamed wealth. The long cashmere coat that looked like it cost more than a year of groceries. The leather handbag with gold hardware that gleamed even in the dim afternoon light. The pearl earrings visible even from 20 feet away. The way she held herself, like the sidewalk belonged to her, like the world bent to accommodate her presence. She was talking on her phone, one hand gesturing sharply as she spoke, clearly agitated about something important. Business probably, stocks, investments, things that people like Daniel would never understand because they lived in a different universe entirely. Yes, I understand the portfolio needs rebalancing, but she stepped off the curb, still talking, her attention completely absorbed in whatever crisis was unfolding in her privileged world. Her foot hit a slick patch of ice hidden beneath fresh snow. She stumbled, caught herself on a streetlight, but her purse swung wide. A brown leather wallet flew out, tumbling through the air like a bird shot mid-flight, before hitting the ground with a muffled thud. The woman didn't notice. She kept walking, still talking into her phone, her voice fading as she disappeared around the corner, completely oblivious to what she'd lost. The wallet sat there in the snow for maybe 3 seconds. Then the wind pushed it, slowly at first, then faster, sliding along the icy sidewalk toward the storm drain, where it would disappear forever into Detroit's underground, lost in the labyrinth of sewers and forgotten things. Daniel was already moving. He ran, his worn sneakers slipping on the ice, his arms windmilling to keep his balance. The wallet was 8 feet from the drain, 6 feet, 4. Daniel dropped to his knees, his jeans immediately soaking through the cold concrete, biting into his skin through the wet fabric like teeth. His hand shot out, fingers scraping against wet leather just as the wallet reached the edge of the grate, teetering on the precipice between salvation and loss. Got it. He stayed there for a moment, kneeling in a puddle of slush that had already soaked through his jeans to his skin, his hand clutched tight around the wallet. Snow fell on his face, melting into his eyes, dripping from his chin. His knees throbbed where they'd hit the concrete, probably scraped raw beneath his jeans. "Man, you okay?" An older teenager passing by paused, looking concerned. He was bundled in a thick parka, warm and dry, the kind of coat Daniel dreamed about. "Yeah." Daniel pushed himself up, wincing as gravel and ice stuck to his scraped knees. He looked down at the wallet in his hands. It was heavy, real leather, soft and expensive, the kind that got better with age instead of falling apart. The kind that probably cost more than Daniel had spent on clothes in his entire life. The stitching was perfect, the leather supple and rich, even wet and cold it felt like quality. He turned it over, and his breath caught. Daniel opened it. The first thing he saw was the cash. Bills, lots of them, crisp and new, stacked thick in the main compartment. His eyes flicked over the numbers. 20s, 50s, hundreds, more money than he'd ever held in his life. He carefully pulled out the stack, trying to count. 30, 40, 50, he stopped. There had to be at least $4,500 here. $4,500, that was food. Real food, hot meals for months, that was protein and vegetables and fruit that wasn't bruised. That was eating until he was full, not just until the pain stopped. That was cooking real dinners for the little kids at Riverside, watching their faces light up when they got seconds, when there was actually enough. That was new shoes that didn't have holes, shoes that kept his feet dry, shoes that didn't give him blisters. That was a winter coat that actually kept him warm, one with real insulation and a hood that worked. That was socks without holes, underwear that wasn't falling apart, jeans that fit properly. That was textbooks for next semester without having to choose between eating and studying. That was not having to check out books from the library and pray nobody else needed them. That was being able to afford the stupid online access codes that professors required, the ones that cost $100 and made the difference between passing and failing. That was a security deposit on an apartment when he aged out of the system in 1 year. That was first and last month's rent. That was furniture from Goodwill instead of sleeping on the floor. That was not being homeless with nowhere to go and no one to help. That was a future that didn't end in a shelter or a street corner. That was everything he needed. Everything he dreamed about in the desperate hours between midnight and dawn when sleep wouldn't come, and his stomach growled and the weight of his uncertain future pressed down on his chest like a stone. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. His fingers moved through the rest of the wallet on autopilot, his brain still stuck on those bills, on what they could mean, on the life they could buy. Credit cards. Black ones. The kind he'd heard were for rich people who spent more in a day than Daniel saw in a year. A driver's license. He pulled it out, tilting it to catch the light from a nearby street lamp that had just flickered on in the gathering dusk. Catherine Ann Whitmore. The address was in Grosse Pointe, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Michigan, maybe one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in America. The kind of place where the houses had names, where the lawns were maintained by professional crews, where the driveways held cars that cost more than most people made in a decade. Behind the license, he found a business card. Thick, expensive paper, the kind that had weight and texture, embossed letters that caught the light. Catherine Whitmore, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Whitmore Development Corporation. A phone number. An email. An office address downtown in one of those glass towers Daniel had been walking past. Daniel stared at the card, his mind spinning. Whitmore Development. He'd seen that name before, on buildings around the city, on construction sites, on billboards advertising luxury condos, real estate development. The kind of company that owned half of Detroit. The kind of company that bought neighborhoods and transformed them, displacing the poor and building playgrounds for the rich. This woman had everything. More than everything, she had the kind of wealth Daniel couldn't even conceptualize. She probably spent more on lunch than he spent on food in a month. She probably didn't even think about money, didn't have to check her account before buying something, didn't have to make choices between necessities. And she wouldn't even notice this money was gone. $4,500 was probably pocket change to her. She probably had more than that in her couch cushions. She probably wouldn't even realize it was missing until she tried to buy something and had to use a different credit card. Maybe not even then. Maybe she'd never notice at all. Nobody would know. Daniel's thumb brushed over the bills. They were so new they almost stuck together, crisp and perfect like they'd just come from the bank. $200 would feed the little kids at Riverside House for 2 weeks. Jasmine, the 7-year-old who cried every night because she was still hungry after dinner, whose ribs showed through her shirt. Little David, who was 9 and had grown out of his shoes 3 months ago but was still wearing them, his toes pressed against the front, walking on the sides of his feet to try to make them last. Tiny Aisha, who was 5, and sometimes didn't get a snack because they ran out, who'd asked Daniel last week if you could die from being hungry, her eyes wide and serious. He could help them. Right now. Today. All he had to do was take a few bills from a woman who wouldn't even notice they were gone. A woman who probably spent more than this on a single dinner, on a pair of shoes, on a haircut. It wasn't even really stealing, was it? She'd lost it, dropped it in the snow. If he hadn't caught it, it would be in the sewer right now, gone forever. He'd saved it. Didn't that mean it was his? Finders keepers, wasn't that what people said? She'd been careless, she'd been so absorbed in her important phone call, her important business crisis, that she hadn't even noticed dropping enough money to change Daniel's entire life. Why should she get to be careless when people like Daniel had to count every penny? Why should she get to have so much that she could lose this amount and not even notice while Daniel went to bed hungry? Where was the fairness in that? Where was the justice? His heart pounded, his hands trembled, the money felt heavy, significant, like it was pulling him in 2 directions at once. Just take 200. Just enough to help the kids. She'll never know, you'd be helping them. That's not stealing. That's justice. That's evening the score. Do what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The voice in his head wasn't his own. It was a memory faded and soft, like something from a dream. His mother's voice, maybe. Or at least the voice he imagined she might have had. The mother he'd never known, who'd died the day he was born, who'd left him nothing but a photograph and a dream of what might have been. Daniel closed his eyes, snow falling on his face, melting on his skin. His chest felt tight, like he couldn't breathe. His mother, Alicia Thompson. He knew her name from the one photograph he had, creased and worn from being handled too many times. He kept it in a plastic sleeve, protected, carried it everywhere. A young black woman, maybe 18 years old, with bright eyes and a smile that could light up a room. She was beautiful, strong, alive in a way that made the photo seem to move. The photograph was all he had of her. That and the note written on the back in fading ink, the words he'd memorized like a prayer. Daniel, Mommy loves you forever. Be good. Be kind. Alicia. Be good. Be kind. Those words had guided him through 18 years of group homes and foster families, through hunger and cold and loneliness, through nights when he wanted to give up, wanted to become hard and mean and angry like so many other kids in the system, through moments when being good seemed stupid, when kindness seemed like weakness. But he'd held on to those words like a lifeline, because they were all he had of her, because he wanted to believe that somewhere, somehow, she was watching, that she'd be proud of him. That he could make her sacrifice mean something. Daniel opened his eyes and looked at the money again. $4,500. Maybe his whole future in his hands, but what would his mother think? If she could see him right now, kneeling in the snow, holding money that wasn't his, contemplating theft because he was desperate. She dropped it. It's not mine. The thought was clear and sharp, cutting through all the justifications and rationalizations his desperate mind had been constructing. It wasn't his. It didn't matter that he needed it more. It didn't matter that she wouldn't miss it. It didn't matter that life was unfair and the system was broken and he deserved a break after 18 years of getting nothing but the short end of every stick. It wasn't his. Be good. Be kind. Daniel's hands shook as he shoved the cash back into the wallet, making sure everything was secure. Every instinct screamed at him to reconsider, to take just a little, to give himself a chance. His stomach cramped with hunger. His future loomed uncertain and terrifying. But he closed the wallet and held it tight in his fist, then he turned and ran back the way he'd come. His shoes splashing through puddles of slush, his breath coming hard and fast. He had to do this now, before he changed his mind, before his survival instincts overrode his mother's voice, before he became someone he didn't want to be. The woman had turned the corner. Daniel remembered which way. His lungs burned from the cold air, but he pushed harder, running faster than he'd run in years. There. Half a block ahead, still on her phone, walking fast like the snow was personally offending her. "Ma'am," Daniel called out. His voice cracked slightly. Even at 18, it sometimes did that when he was nervous or scared or running. "Ma'am, wait." She didn't hear him. Or she did and ignored him, assuming he was just another person on the street. He ran faster. "Ma'am, you dropped something." This time she stopped, turned around, her phone still pressed to her ear. Her eyes scanned the street, landed on him, a young black man in inadequate clothes, soaking wet, running toward her, and something changed in her expression. Daniel saw it. The way she automatically clutched her purse tighter, the way she took a half step back, the way her free hand moved toward her phone like she was ready to dial 911, the way her whole body tensed preparing for threat. She thought he was going to rob her. The realization hit him like a punch to the stomach. After everything, after choosing to return the money, after running through the snow to help her, she looked at him and saw a threat. Because of his skin, because of his clothes, because of assumptions she'd made in a split second. For a moment, Daniel almost turned around, almost kept the wallet out of spite, almost let her stand there in her expensive coat with her prejudiced assumptions and learn the hard way what happens when you judge people. But he didn't. He reached her, breathing hard, holding out the wallet with both hands like an offering. "You dropped this," he said, between breaths, his voice careful and controlled despite the hurt burning in his chest. "Back there on the corner. It almost went down the drain. I caught it just in time." The woman stared at him, then at the wallet, then back at him, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something else Daniel couldn't quite identify. Slowly, cautiously, she lowered her phone from her ear. "Excuse me, I'll call you back," she said into it. Her voice distracted. She ended the call, but her eyes never left the wallet in Daniel's hands, searching for the trick, the angle, the danger. "That's yours, right?" Daniel asked, still catching his breath. He felt the cold now, seeping into his bones, his teeth starting to chatter. "Catherine Whitmore. I saw your license. I had to check who it belonged to so I could find you. You opened it." Her voice was sharp, suspicious, accusatory, like he'd committed a crime by trying to return her property. Daniel felt something twist inside him, but he kept his voice steady. "I had to check who it belonged to," he explained, forcing himself to stay calm, to not react to the judgment in her tone. "Otherwise I wouldn't have known who to return it to. I wouldn't have been able to find you." The woman reached out and took the wallet from his hands, her fingers carefully avoiding his like she was afraid of contamination. She opened it immediately, her fingers moving quickly through the compartments, checking the cash, counting it, examining the cards, making sure nothing was missing, that this wasn't some elaborate scam where he'd taken things out before returning it. Daniel stood there, dripping wet, shivering, watching her verify that he wasn't a thief. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd just given up $4,500 more money than he'd ever seen, and she was checking to make sure he hadn't stolen from her. The anger built slowly in his chest. Not the explosive kind, but the cold, bitter kind that settles in when you realize how the world sees you. When you realize that no matter what you do, some people will always see you as a threat first and a person second. Finally she looked up. Her face had gone pale beneath her makeup, her carefully applied foundation suddenly stark against her bloodless lips. "This is," she stammered. "All of it, everything's here." "Yes, ma'am." Daniel's voice came out flat, emotionless. "You didn't take anything?" She asked it like she couldn't quite believe it. Like the question itself was absurd, like a young black man in worn clothes couldn't possibly be honest. The question stung worse than the cold. Daniel felt something harden inside him, a protective shell forming around the hurt. "No, ma'am," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "It's not mine. I don't take things that don't belong to me." The emphasis on the last sentence was deliberate. A quiet rebuke, a reminder that he had more integrity in his worn-out sneakers than she seemed to expect. Catherine Whitmore stared at him for a long moment. Really looked at him. His soaked clothes, worn thin and patched in places. His sneakers with the sole coming loose on one side. The way he was shaking from the cold, his lips probably blue by now. Her eyes moved from his face to his hands, still reddened from the cold, fingernails, short and clean despite everything, to the scrapes on his knees where he dived to catch her wallet, blood seeping through the wet denim. Something in her expression changed. The suspicion faded, replaced by something else. Something that looked almost like shame. Like she was seeing him for the first time, really seeing him, and didn't like what that said about her initial reaction. She seemed to be searching for words, her practiced business composure cracking. You ran after me, in this snow. To return this, yes ma'am, but the money. Her voice was softer now, uncertain. There's $4,500 in here. You saw that? Yes ma'am, I counted it. Twice. And you didn't take any of it. She asked it again, like she needed to hear it twice to believe it, like the concept was foreign to her understanding of how the world worked. Daniel met her eyes, held her gaze steady, let her see the person she'd almost missed. No ma'am, like I said, it's not mine. I don't take things that aren't mine, no matter how much I might need them. The last part came out with more edge than he'd intended, but he didn't regret it. Catherine Whitmore's hand went to her throat, touching the pearl necklace that probably cost more than a car. She looked at Daniel like she was seeing something that didn't fit her understanding of the world, like all her assumptions were being challenged at once. A young black man, clearly poor, clearly struggling, soaking wet and shivering in inadequate clothes, $4,500 in his hands. And he'd given it all back without taking a single bill, without asking for anything, without even seeming to want recognition. And she'd looked at him like he was going to rob her. I don't. Catherine's voice was quieter now, the sharp business edge softening into something more human. Most people wouldn't have done that. Most people would have kept it, would have taken at least something. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He just stood there, cold and wet and tired and angry in a way he couldn't quite articulate. Angry at her for assuming the worst. Angry at a world that made those assumptions inevitable. Angry at himself for still caring what she thought. The snow kept falling, heavier now. The afternoon fading into evening. A car passed by, its tires crunching through the slush, headlights cutting through the gathering dark. Catherine seemed to notice for the first time that he was still standing there, getting drenched, that he'd been standing in the snow explaining himself while she verified his honesty like a criminal being processed. She glanced down the street, then back at him, and something shifted in her face. Guilt, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. Come with me, she said suddenly, her voice firm but softer than before. There's a cafe right there. You need to get out of this cold. You're shivering. Let me buy you something warm. Please. Daniel hesitated. Part of him wanted to refuse, wanted to walk away with his dignity intact, wanted to let her stand there with her guilt and her money and her assumptions. But he was freezing. And hungry. And the truth was, he didn't want to go back out into that cold, didn't want to walk another 40 minutes to Riverside House, didn't want to face the reality of what he'd just given up. Okay, he said finally, his voice guarded. Just for a minute. Catherine nodded, and Daniel thought he saw relief flash across her face. She turned and walked toward a small cafe with warm light spilling out onto the snowy sidewalk, golden and inviting. Daniel followed, his scraped knees stinging with every step, his mind churning with conflicting emotions. Pride at doing the right thing mixed with resentment at how she'd looked at him. Satisfaction at proving her wrong mixed with anger that he'd had to prove anything at all. The cafe was small and warm, the kind of place where business people grabbed coffee between meetings. Daniel had walked past places like this 100 times, but never been inside. They always seemed to exist in a different dimension, a world he could see but not touch. A waiter appeared almost instantly, materializing with the quiet efficiency of someone who knew exactly who Catherine Whitmore was. Mrs. Whitmore, good to see you. Hello Marcus. Her voice was warm, practiced, belonging to someone used to being recognized. Then she looked at Daniel, really looked, and the warmth shifted into something more careful. Can we get a large hot chocolate? And she paused. Are you hungry? A silly question. Hunger was Daniel's silent shadow, always there. I'm okay, he said automatically. Catherine narrowed her eyes, seeing straight through him. When's the last time you ate? Daniel hesitated. Lunch. What did you have? A sandwich. Her lips tightened, disapproval wrapped in concern. That's not nearly enough for a growing young man. She turned to the waiter. Marcus, we'll need a steak, medium rare, with mashed potatoes, green beans and bread. And make his hot chocolate, large extra whipped cream. Right away Mrs. Whitmore. When he left, Catherine folded her hands neatly on the table. Her rings caught the soft lamplight, scattering it like little shards of winter. "What's your name?" she asked quietly. "Daniel Thompson. How old are you?" 18. "And Miss Patricia, you said she runs Riverside House." Daniel looked down at his wet hands. "Yes, ma'am. It's a group home on the east side. I've been there my whole life." Something flickered across Catherine's expression, recognition, or memory, or the beginning of dread. Then the hot chocolate arrived, piled absurdly high with whipped cream. Daniel wrapped both hands around the mug, letting the warmth bleed into his numb fingers. The first sip was almost painful in its richness. Real chocolate, real milk, something made with intention, not rationed powder. Catherine watched the way his shoulders dropped slightly, the way warmth softened the angles of someone too used to cold. "Your parents?" she asked gently. "Mom died when I was born," Daniel said, voice flat from repetition, complications from childbirth. "I don't know who my dad is. I'm sorry." "It's okay. It wasn't. It never would be." The food arrived then, steak thick and steaming, mashed potatoes smooth and creamy, green beans, bright and crisp, bread still warm enough to melt the butter. Daniel stared at it like it was something unreal, a feast from a life that belonged to someone else. "Go on," Catherine said softly. "Please." Daniel picked up the fork, hands slightly trembling from cold and something deeper. The first bite of steak nearly undid him. Salt, fat, warmth, flavor. His stomach twisted sharply, overwhelmed. He forced himself to slow down, to chew with dignity, to pretend he wasn't starving. Catherine watched in silence, an unreadable ache in her eyes. "Do you go to school?" she asked eventually. "Yes, ma'am. Cass Tech. I'm graduating in the spring." And after that, no one had ever asked him that, as if the answer mattered. "College," Daniel said carefully. "If I can get the aid, I want to study social work, help kids like me." Catherine's eyebrows lifted, a quiet bloom of admiration. "That's very noble." "Someone has to do it," Daniel murmured, cutting another piece of steak. "The system's broken, kids get lost every day, and you want to fix it." "I want to try." She fell silent again, fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. There was something trembling under her calm, something old, something wounded. "Daniel," she said softly, "may I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why didn't you keep the money? Even just a little?" Daniel paused, setting his fork down. "Because it wasn't mine." "But you clearly need help. That money could have changed things for you." "Helping myself by stealing doesn't make me better," Daniel said, voice low but firm. "It just makes me what people expect me to be. Someone I don't want to become." "Who taught you that?" Her voice cracked. "My mom, I guess. Sort of." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the plastic sleeve. "This is all I have of her." He slid it across the table. Catherine took it as though it were a fragile relic. The photograph showed a young black woman glowing with love despite exhaustion, a tiny baby in her arms. Catherine stared too long. Her face went pale, then flushed, then pale again. Her fingers trembled. Something inside her seemed to crack open. "Her name was Alicia," Daniel said quietly. "Alicia Thompson. She died a few hours after that picture was taken." "Alicia Thompson." "Yes, ma'am." Are you okay?" She blinked hard, like pulling herself out of a memory she wasn't ready to face. "Yes, I'm sorry, she's beautiful. You have her eyes. People say that." Catherine turned the photo over. The faded ink seemed to hit her like a physical blow. "Daniel Robert. Be good. Be kind. Love always, Mama." "Daniel Robert," she whispered, unsteady. "That's your full name?" "Yes, ma'am. Robert's my middle name." Her eyes closed. Her breath shuddered. She looked like the ground beneath her had shifted unexpectedly. "Mrs. Whitmore." Daniel leaned forward. "Are you sure you're okay?" Her eyes opened, full of sorrow and yearning. "Yes, I'm fine. You just remind me so much of someone I lost." She returned the photo gently, reverently. But she didn't stop staring at him, searching his face like it held answers she'd been chasing for years. They finished the meal quietly. Catherine barely drank her coffee. Her thoughts were somewhere far away, 18 years back. Then she handed him her business card. "This has my personal number," she said, her voice uneven. "If you ever need anything, you call me." day or night. There was urgency in the words, a promise deeper than gratitude. Daniel nodded. Outside, snow had stopped falling. The city glowed under streetlights, quiet and shimmering. "Can I give you a ride?" Catherine asked. "I'm good. It's not far." Another lie, familiar and small. Catherine hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything, for your honesty, for your kindness, for being exactly who you are." "You're welcome, ma'am." She left in the black sedan. Daniel began walking, unaware the earth had shifted beneath his feet. Inside the car, Catherine covered her mouth with her hand to stifle a sob. Daniel Robert. Alicia Thompson, 18 years old. Born the night Alicia died. It couldn't be, but it was. "Home, Mrs. Whitmore?" the driver asked. "No," she whispered. "Take me to the office. I need to check something." She called her assistant with trembling hands, ordering the archived files from 2006. When she hung up, city lights blurred through her tears. Daniel Robert Thompson, her grandson, the baby she abandoned, and he had returned her wallet with $4,500 untouched. Catherine pressed her forehead to the cold window and wept. Catherine's hands shook as she unlocked her office building. The lobby was dark, empty, the cleaning crew long gone. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floors as she made her way to the elevator. She couldn't stop thinking about his face. The way he'd looked at that money, so much need in his eyes, and then put it back. The way he'd spoken about wanting to help other kids in the system. The way he'd carefully protected that photograph of his mother. Alicia. The elevator doors opened to her executive floor. She walked to her office in a daze, turned on the lights and sank into her chair. Alicia Thompson. Daniel Robert Thompson. It couldn't be coincidence. The name, the age, the story of a mother dying in childbirth, it all fit too perfectly. But she needed to be sure. Needed proof before she what? Told him. Told him that his grandmother had known about him all along and chose to walk away. Catherine's stomach churned. Miss Porter arrived 20 minutes later, still in her pajamas under a long coat, carrying 3 file boxes that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. "Here," she said, setting them on Catherine's desk with a heavy thud. "Everything from Robert's final year. What are we looking for?" "A name. Alicia Thompson." Miss Porter's face went pale. "Mrs. Whitmore, find it, please." They worked in tense silence, pulling out folders, scanning documents. Catherine's hands shook as she flipped through papers she'd tried to forget. Financial records, legal documents, photos she couldn't bear to look at. And then Miss Porter found it. "Here," she said quietly, holding up a marriage certificate. Catherine took it with trembling hands. Marriage certificate, State of Michigan, Robert James Whitmore. Age 24, Alicia Marie Thompson. Age 20, date of marriage, August 10, 2006. Her breath left her in a rush. She'd known they'd gotten married. Robert had told her, had tried to get her to come to the wedding, had begged her to meet Alicia. And she'd refused. Cut him off completely. "Keep looking," Catherine whispered. "Birth certificate, death certificates, everything." Miss Porter pulled out another folder. Inside were 2 certificates, paper clipped together. The first was a death certificate for Robert James Whitmore. Date of death, December 15, 2006. Cause, blunt force trauma from motor vehicle accident. Catherine had been at the hospital when they told her, had identified her son's body, had signed papers in a fog of grief. The second certificate made her stop breathing. Death certificate, State of Michigan, name, Alicia Marie Thompson Whitmore. Age 20, date of death, December 15, 2006, 11:47 p.m. Cause, hemorrhagic shock following emergency cesarean section. Place, Detroit General Hospital, December 15. The same day Robert died. Alicia had gone into early labor, stress-induced, the doctors had said. Robert had been rushing her to the hospital when the drunk driver hit them. Catherine pressed her hand to her mouth. She'd known Alicia died, had been told, but she'd been so consumed by her own grief over losing Robert that she'd barely processed it. "There's more," Miss Porter said softly. She held out a third certificate. Catherine took it with shaking hands. Birth certificate, State of Michigan, name, Daniel Robert Thompson. Date of birth, December 15, 2006, 11:43 p.m. Mother, Alicia Marie Thompson. Father, unknown. Weight, 5 pounds 2 ounces. Premature notes, emergency C-section. Mother deceased, infant transferred to NICU. Daniel Robert Thompson, born 4 minutes before his mother died. Catherine's vision blurred, she could barely breathe. Mrs. Whitmore. Miss Porter's voice seemed to come from far away. Should I call someone? No, I need. Catherine swallowed hard. Is there anything else? Any other documents? Miss Porter pulled out a thin folder. This is from Child Protective Services. Inside was a single form, yellowed with age. State of Michigan Child Protective Services. Case number 2006-12-4789. Subject male infant. Daniel Robert Thompson. Mother deceased, father unknown, deceased next of kin. Investigation completed December 20, 2006. Paternal grandmother identified Catherine Ann Whitmore. Contact made December 21, 2006. Custody offered. Yes. And there, at the bottom of the page, in her own handwriting, I am unable to provide care for the child at this time, due to age and professional obligations. I decline custody. Signature, Catherine A. Whitmore. Date December 21, 2006. Catherine stared at the signature. Her signature. The choice she'd made 18 years ago when she'd been drowning in grief and rage and prejudice. She'd stood in that hospital, looking through the glass at a tiny baby fighting for his life, and she'd walked away. Because he was Alicia's son. Because he was black. Because accepting him would mean admitting she'd been wrong about everything. Oh God, Catherine whispered. What have I done? Miss Porter sat down across from her. Mrs. Whitmore, are you saying, he found my wallet today? Catherine said, her voice hollow. A young man, 18 years old. His name is Daniel Robert Thompson. His mother was Alicia Thompson, who died giving birth to him. He's been in foster care his entire life. She looked up at her assistant. It's him. It's Robert's son. My grandson. And today he found my wallet with $4,500 in it, and he gave it all back. Even though he's hungry and cold and wearing shoes with holes in them. He gave it all back. Miss Porter's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God. I abandoned him, Catherine said, the words cutting like glass. I let him grow up in the system. In poverty, in group homes, while I sat in my mansion with my money and my pride, and today, her voice broke. Today he saved my wallet from falling down a drain. He could have kept the money. He should have kept it, but he didn't, because his mother Alicia taught him to be good and kind, even though she only had hours with him. She pressed the birth certificate to her chest and sobbed. What are you going to do? Miss Porter asked quietly. Catherine looked at the documents spread across her desk. The proof of her son's love for a woman Catherine had deemed unworthy. The proof of her grandson's existence. The proof of her own cowardice. I don't know if he'll forgive me, she said. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I have to tell him the truth. He deserves to know who he is, who his parents were, that his father loved him desperately. She stood up, her legs shaky. I need to find out everything I can about Alicia, about who she really was, not who I assumed she was, but who she actually was. Why? Because I was wrong about her. Completely devastatingly wrong, and if I'm going to face my grandson, I need to be able to tell him about the mother he never knew. The truth, not my prejudices. Miss Porter nodded. I'll help you. They worked through the night. Miss Porter made calls, sent emails, pulled records. By dawn they had assembled a picture of Alicia Marie Thompson that made Catherine's guilt burn even deeper. Alicia had grown up in foster care herself, bouncing between homes until she aged out at 18. She'd worked 2 jobs while putting herself through community college. She'd volunteered at youth centers, teaching kids to read. She'd donated blood regularly. She'd organized food drives for homeless shelters. Look at this, Miss Porter said, holding up a printout. Local news article from 2005. Young woman honored for community service. There's a photo. Catherine looked at the picture. Alicia stood with a group of children at a community center, all of them grinning at the camera. She was radiant, her smile lighting up her whole face. The article described how she'd started a free tutoring program for kids in the foster system. How she spent her Saturdays teaching them to read, helping with homework, being the stable adult presence many of them had never had. These kids deserve someone who believes in them. the article quoted her. "I know what it's like to feel forgotten. I won't let that happen to them." Catherine's tears fell onto the paper, smearing the ink. This was the woman she'd rejected, the woman she'd deemed unworthy of her son. This kind, generous, selfless woman who'd dedicated her life to helping others, who'd grown up with nothing, and used that pain to lift up others in the same situation. "Robert saw her," Catherine whispered. "He saw who she really was, and I was too blind to look." Miss Porter handed her more documents. Character references from Alicia's professors, thank you notes from parents whose children she'd helped, a recommendation letter for a social work program she'd been accepted to before she died. Every piece of paper was another knife in Catherine's heart. She was going to be a social worker, Catherine said numbly. Just like Daniel wants to be. She would have been wonderful at it, Miss Porter said softly. Catherine gathered all the documents about Alicia, the articles, the letters, the photos, and put them in a separate folder. "I need to go to Riverside House," she said. "I need to see where he's been living, what his life has been like. It's 6 in the morning. I don't care. I've wasted 18 years. I won't waste another minute." But when she stood up, her legs wouldn't hold her. She sank back into her chair, the weight of what she'd done crushing her. "How do I face him?" she whispered. "How do I tell him that his grandmother knew about him all along and chose to leave him in the system? That I could have given him a home, a family, everything, and I said no because I was a bigoted coward." "You tell him the truth," Miss Porter said. "All of it. You don't make excuses, you don't try to justify it. You tell him exactly what you did and why, and then you let him decide what happens next." Catherine nodded slowly. "And if he hates me, then he has every right to." "But Mrs. Whitmore," Miss Porter's voice was gentle, "he gave back your wallet, even though he needed that money desperately. He's been taught forgiveness and kindness in a way most people never learn. Maybe there's hope." "Hope," Catherine repeated. "I don't deserve it, maybe not, but he might give it to you anyway. That's who his mother raised him to be, even from beyond the grave." Catherine stood again, steadier this time. "I need to shower and change. Then I'm going to Riverside House. Will you call ahead? Tell Miss Patricia I'm coming. I don't want to ambush them." Of course, Catherine gathered the files, the evidence of her son's love, her grandson's existence, and her own terrible choice, and headed for the door. "Mrs. Whitmore," Miss Porter called after her. Catherine turned. "Good luck. I hope he gives you a chance." "So do I," Catherine whispered. "So do I." Catherine pulled up to Riverside House at 9 o'clock that morning. She'd barely slept, had changed clothes 3 times, had practiced what to say over and over until the words lost all meaning. Now, sitting in her car across the street, she could only stare at the building where her grandson lived. It was worse than she'd imagined. The 3-story structure sagged in the middle, its roof patched with mismatched shingles, paint peeled from the siding in long strips, exposing rotted wood beneath. Several windows were cracked, held together with tape. The front steps were broken in 2 places, with handwritten signs warning people to watch their step. In the side yard, a rusted playground sat in frozen mud. One swing hung by a single chain. The slide was missing half its steps, a basketball hoop had no net, and the backboard was splintered. This was where Daniel lived, where he'd lived his entire life. Catherine gripped the steering wheel, fighting the urge to vomit. She'd known, intellectually, that group homes were underfunded, but seeing the actual conditions her grandson had endured while she lived in luxury, made it real in a way that stabbed through her chest. She forced herself out of the car. The folder of documents felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Inside, the building smelled like industrial cleaner fighting a losing battle against mildew and overcooked food. The walls were covered in children's drawings, bright attempts to make the space feel less institutional. The tape holding them up was yellowed and peeling. A worn couch sat in what passed for a living room, its stuffing visible through tears in the fabric. Mismatched chairs surrounded a scarred table. A small TV sat on a milk crate in the corner, its screen cracked. A woman appeared from a side hallway, black mid-40s, wearing scrubs that had been washed so many times they were nearly transparent. She had kind eyes set in an exhausted face. "Mrs. Whitmore," she asked. "I'm Patricia Jackson. We spoke on the phone." "Thank you for seeing me," Catherine said, her voice barely steady. Miss Patricia's expression was wary but professional. "Your assistant said this was about Daniel, that it was urgent." "It is. Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" Miss Patricia led her to a small office that was really just a converted closet. A desk took up most of the space, covered in papers and files. Two folding chairs faced each other across it. They sat. Miss Patricia folded her hands and waited, her posture protective. Catherine took a breath. "I need to tell you something that's going to sound impossible, but it's true, and I have documentation to prove it." "I'm listening." "Daniel Thompson is my grandson." Miss Patricia's expression didn't change. "Excuse me." Catherine opened the folder and pulled out the marriage certificate. 18 years ago, my son Robert married a young woman named Alicia Thompson. I didn't approve. I was cruel to both of them. I cut Robert off completely when he chose her." She slid the certificate across the desk. Miss Patricia picked it up, her eyes scanning the names and date. 4 months after they married, Alicia went into premature labor. Robert was driving her to the hospital when a drunk driver hit them. Robert died on impact. Alicia survived long enough to deliver Daniel via emergency C-section, then passed away less than an hour later. Miss Patricia's hand went to her mouth. Catherine continued, her voice hollow. "Child Protective Services contacted me, told me I had a grandson in the NEU, asked if I would take custody." She pulled out the CPS form, the one with her signature declining custody. "I said no." "Why?" Miss Patricia's voice was hard. "Because I was a coward, because Alicia was black and Catherine's voice broke. "I let my prejudice matter more than my grandson's well-being. I walked away from him, let him enter the foster system. And I've spent the last 18 years trying not to think about what I'd done." She pulled out the rest of the documents, the birth certificate, the death certificates, the articles about Alicia, and spread them across the desk. "Yesterday Daniel found my wallet. There was $4,500 in it. He gave it all back, wouldn't even accept a reward." Catherine's tears fell freely now. "I took him to a cafe to get him out of the cold. He showed me a photograph of his mother, and I knew who he was." Miss Patricia stared at the documents, her jaw working. When she looked up, her eyes blazed with fury. "Do you have any idea what this boy has been through?" Her voice shook. "Do you have any concept of what you did to him?" "No," Catherine whispered. "But I want to understand. I need to understand. He's been in 7 different placements since he was born. 7, some good, most not. He's gone to bed hungry more nights than I can count. He's worn shoes that hurt his feet because we couldn't afford new ones. He's walked miles in the snow to save bus fare." Miss Patricia stood, her fists clenched. "He's watched other kids get adopted, get families, get out, while he stayed behind. Do you know what that does to a child? To watch everyone else get chosen while you never are." Catherine couldn't speak, could only sit there and absorb the weight of what her choice had cost. "He's the kindest kid I've ever met," Miss Patricia continued, her voice breaking. "He shares his food when he's starving. He comforts the little ones when they cry. He helps with homework, breaks up fights, volunteers for every chore. He makes this place bearable for everyone else, even though he's suffering just as much." "I know," Catherine said. "I saw it yesterday. His kindness, his integrity, and She looked up at Miss Patricia. "I came here to tell him the truth. If he'll see me, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but he deserves to know who he is, who his parents were." Miss Patricia studied her for a long moment. "Does he know you're here?" "No, I wanted to speak with you first, to understand what I'm walking into." "You're walking into the life you could have prevented." Miss Patricia's voice was like ice. "You're walking into 18 years of pain and loneliness that you caused. That's what you're walking into." Catherine nodded, accepting the blow. "Will you let me see him?" "It's not up to me, it's up to Daniel." Miss Patricia walked to the door. "Wait here." She left and Catherine sat alone in the tiny office, surrounded by evidence of her failures.
Through the thin walls, she could hear children's voices, playing, arguing, laughing, living their lives in a place that was doing its best but would never be enough. She stood and walked to the single window. It overlooked the backyard, where a few older kids were playing basketball with the netless hoop. Daniel was there, wearing the same thin jacket from yesterday, laughing as he passed the ball to a younger boy. As Catherine watched, Daniel noticed a little girl standing alone near the fence shivering. He immediately took off his jacket, his only jacket, and draped it over her shoulders. The girl's face lit up. Daniel ruffled her hair and said something that made her giggle. Catherine pressed her hand against the window, her chest aching. That was her grandson, kind, selfless, caring for others even when he had nothing himself, just like Alicia had been. The door opened behind her. Catherine turned to see Daniel standing in the doorway, Miss Patricia behind him. His expression was confused, wary. "Daniel," Catherine said, her voice shaking. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Miss Patricia said it was important, that it was about my family. His voice rose slightly at the end, hopeful and afraid at the same time.
"Yes, please sit down." Catherine gestured to the chair Miss Patricia had vacated. Daniel sat slowly, his body language guarded. Miss Patricia remained in the doorway watching like a hawk. Catherine sat across from him, the folder between them like a barrier and a bridge. "Daniel, what I'm about to tell you it's going to be hard to hear, and I need you to know up front that I don't expect anything from you. I'm not here to make demands or to ease my own guilt. I'm here because you deserve the truth." Daniel's eyes flickered to the folder, then back to her face. "What truth?" Catherine took a breath and began. 18 years ago I had a son named Robert. He was 24 years old, smart, kind, everything a mother could want. One day he came home and told me he'd fallen in love. She pulled out a photograph of Robert, young, handsome, grinning at the camera, and slid it across the desk. Daniel picked it up slowly, his eyes widened. "He looks like you," Catherine said softly. "Yes, because Robert was your father." The photograph slipped from Daniel's fingers. "What?" he whispered. Catherine pulled out the marriage certificate. "Robert married your mother, Alicia Thompson, in August of 2006. I didn't approve. I said terrible things. I told him if he chose her he was choosing to lose his family." She slid more documents across. "The death certificates. The accident report. 4 months later your mother went into premature labor. Robert was rushing her to the hospital when a drunk driver ran a red light. Your father died on impact." Catherine's voice broke. "Your mother survived long enough to deliver you, then she hemorrhaged. She didn't make it." Daniel stared at the documents, his hands shaking. "My dad, he died trying to save me. He died trying to save both of you. He loved you before you were even born. Your mother named you Daniel Robert, Daniel after her favorite teacher, Robert after your father. Even dying she made sure you had his name." Tears streamed down Daniel's face. "Then why, if you knew about me, why wasn't I with you? Why did I grow up here?" This was the moment. The question Catherine deserved. She pulled out the final document, the CPS form with her signature. "Because I'm a coward," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "When Child Protective Services contacted me, told me I had a grandson, asked if I would take custody." She pushed the form toward him. "I said no." Daniel picked up the paper with shaking hands, read her signature, the date, the words "unable to provide care." "Why?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Because your mother was black and I." Catherine forced herself to look at him directly. "I let my prejudice destroy everything. I told myself you'd be better off elsewhere, that I was too old, too busy, but the truth is I was afraid. Afraid of what people would think. Afraid of admitting I'd been wrong about your mother. Afraid of having to face my own bigotry every time I looked at you." She leaned forward. "I chose my pride over your well-being. I chose my comfort over your life, and you paid the price for 18 years. Daniel stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. He walked to the window, his back to her, his shoulders shaking. "You knew," he said, his voice raw. "All this time you knew I existed, and you left me here." "Yes, I could have had a family, a home, a grandmother." He turned, his face twisted with pain and rage. "I could have known my father, known where I came from. Instead I grew up thinking I was nobody, that I didn't matter to anyone. I know," And I am so sorry. Sorry. Daniel's voice rose. You're sorry. I went to bed hungry. I wore clothes that didn't fit. I walked miles in the snow. I watched other kids get adopted while I never did. And you're sorry. You're right. Sorry isn't enough. Sorry doesn't come close. Why now? Daniel demanded. Why tell me now? Because I gave back your wallet. Because you feel guilty. Because you showed me a photograph of your mother yesterday and I couldn't pretend anymore. Catherine said, because I've been a coward for 18 years, and seeing the man you've become despite everything I did to you, made me realize I couldn't hide from this anymore. She stood slowly. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm here because you deserve to know the truth about your family, about your parents. She pulled out the folder of articles and letters about Alicia. Your mother was extraordinary, Daniel. She grew up in foster care just like you. And instead of letting it break her, she used it to help others. She volunteered at youth centers, taught kids to read, organized food drives. Everyone who knew her loved her. Daniel took the folder with trembling hands, pulled out the newspaper article with Alicia's photo. Fresh tears fell as he stared at his mother's face. These kids deserve someone who believes in them. Catherine read from the article. I know what it's like to feel forgotten. I won't let that happen to them. That's what your mother said. That's who she was. And my father. Daniel's voice cracked. Catherine pulled out more photos. Robert as a child. Robert graduating college. Robert and Alicia together looking at each other with pure love. Your father was brave. When I gave him an ultimatum, your mother or his family, he chose love. He walked away from everything for her. For you. Catherine's voice thickened. He was so excited to be a dad. He'd already painted a nursery, bought baby clothes, read every parenting book. He talked about you constantly, about the man you'd become, the things you'd do together. Daniel clutched the photos to his chest, sobbing. Catherine wanted to go to him, to hold him, but she held back. She'd forfeited that right 18 years ago. I can't undo the past, she said quietly. I can't give you back the years I stole, but if you'll let me, I want to tell you about them, about your parents, about how much they loved each other and loved you. I want you to know you came from love, Daniel. Even if I failed you, they never did. Daniel turned away, his shoulders shaking. For a long moment the only sound was his ragged breathing. Finally he spoke. I need time to process this. All of this. Of course, take all the time you need. And I don't know if I can forgive you, if I even want to. I understand. Daniel walked to the door, then paused. Without turning around he said, my middle name is Robert. Mom made sure of that, even though she was dying. She wanted you to have a piece of him. A connection. Yeah. Daniel's voice was hollow. I just wish I could have known them. Really known them. So do I. Catherine whispered. Daniel left and Catherine sank into the chair, burying her face in her hands. Miss Patricia came in, her expression unreadable. You need to leave now. Yes. But Catherine looked up. This place, the conditions. Can I? I'd like to help. Not to buy his forgiveness, but because these kids deserve better. We don't need your charity. It's not charity. It's Catherine struggled for the right words. It's the bare minimum of what should have been done years ago. Please, let me at least do this. Miss Patricia studied her for a long moment. $50,000. For renovations, new equipment, better food. And I control how it's spent. Done. My lawyer will have the check to you by Monday. Catherine stood. And Miss Patricia, thank you, for taking care of him. For being the family I should have been. Miss Patricia's expression softened slightly. I didn't do it for you. I did it for him. I know, but I'm grateful anyway. Catherine left Riverside House and sat in her car for a long time, staring at the building where her grandson had grown up without her. She'd told him the truth, faced what she'd done. Now she had to live with the consequences, and hope, though she didn't deserve it, that someday Daniel might give her a chance to be the grandmother she should have been from the beginning. 3 weeks passed. Catherine heard nothing from Daniel. She'd expected as much. What she'd told him was world-shattering. He needed time to process, to grieve, to be angry. She spent those weeks fulfilling her promise to Riverside House. The check was delivered on Monday. By Wednesday, contractors were assessing the building. Within 2 weeks, renovations were underway. Catherine monitored the progress obsessively, calling Miss Patricia daily for updates.
New beds delivered, the heater in the girls' dormitory fixed, the kitchen completely overhauled, fresh paint, repaired windows, a playground that was actually safe. She also worked with Miss Patricia to hire 2 additional staff members, social workers, who could actually help the kids with homework, applications, emotional support, the things they needed but never got because the existing staff was stretched too thin. The kids can't believe it, Miss Patricia told her during one of their calls. Emma asked if it was real, if we were really going to get to keep the new beds. It's real, Catherine said, and permanent. I've set up a fund to ensure Riverside House has what it needs going forward. Why are you doing this? Because I should have done it 18 years ago. Catherine paused. How is he, Daniel? Confused, angry, sad. He's processing. Has he said anything about me? Not to me, but I see him looking at those photographs you gave him. The ones of his parents. He's printed copies, put them up in his space. Catherine's throat tightened. Thank you for telling me. On the 23rd day her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Mrs. Whitmore. Daniel's voice was quiet, uncertain. It's Daniel Thompson. Catherine's hand shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. Daniel, thank you for calling. I wanted to see if maybe we could talk again, if you're still willing. Of course, absolutely. Whenever you want, wherever you want. There's a library near Riverside House, the main branch. Could we meet there? Tomorrow afternoon? Yes. What time? 3 o'clock. I'll be there. After they hung up, Catherine sat in stunned silence. He'd called. He wanted to talk. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. The next day Catherine arrived at the library 20 minutes early. She sat in the reading room, hands clasped tight, watching the door. At 3 o'clock exactly, Daniel walked in. He'd dressed carefully, a clean shirt, jeans that actually fit. His hair was freshly cut. He looked nervous. Catherine stood. Daniel, thank you for coming. Yeah. He shifted his weight. Is there somewhere private we can talk? There are study rooms upstairs. They found an empty room, small with a table and 2 chairs, and sat across from each other. For a moment neither spoke. I've been reading about them, Daniel said finally. My parents. I found more articles online about Mom's volunteer work, and I looked up Dad's obituary, read about his life. They were both remarkable people. Yeah. Daniel's voice was thick. And I never got to know them because they died. And because he stopped himself. Because I chose not to tell you, Catherine finished. It's okay. You can be angry. You should be angry. I am. I'm so angry I can barely think sometimes. Daniel's hands clenched on the table. But I'm grieving, not just for what I lost with you but for them, for parents I never knew I had. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I am so deeply sorry. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then tell me about him. About my dad. The things that wouldn't be in an obituary. Catherine felt something loosen in her chest. This she could do. Robert was brilliant, she began. But not in a showy way. He was curious about everything. He'd spend hours reading about whatever caught his interest. Ancient Rome, jazz music, how engines worked. When he was 7, he took apart my entire kitchen appliance collection, trying to understand how they functioned. A ghost of a smile crossed Daniel's face. He was kind like you. In high school he tutored kids who were struggling. He never made them feel stupid, just patiently explained things until they understood. Catherine's voice softened. And he had terrible jokes, the kind that make you groan. He'd tell them with this completely straight face then crack up at his own punchline. What was his favorite joke? Catherine thought back. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Why? Because they make up everything. Catherine smiled through her tears. He'd tell that one every time we went to the science museum. Every single time. Daniel laughed, a real laugh, short but genuine. That's awful. It is. He had hundreds of them, all equally terrible. They talked for 2 hours. Catherine told Daniel about Robert's childhood, his dreams, his passions, how he'd wanted to be an architect, how he'd loved working with his hands building things, how he'd met Alicia and been absolutely convinced she was the one within a week. He said she made the world make sense, Catherine said. That before her he'd felt like he was just going through motions, but with her everything had meaning. How did they meet? at a community center where she volunteered. Robert had gone there to help build playground equipment, volunteer work for his architecture program. He saw her reading to a group of kids and said later it was like time stopped. Catherine pulled out her phone, showed him a photo she'd scanned. Robert and Alicia at the community center, both paint-splattered and laughing, surrounded by children. They were painting murals, Catherine explained. Your father couldn't paint to save his life, but he kept trying because it meant being near her. Daniel stared at the photo, his finger tracing his parents' faces. They loved each other so much, Catherine said. Despite everything, my objections, financial stress, the uncertainty of starting a life together, they were happy. Really truly happy. And when they found out about you, her voice broke. Robert called me, one last time, to tell me he was going to be a father. He was so excited, Daniel, so ready. What did you say? Catherine looked down. I hung up on him. It was the last time we spoke. Daniel flinched. That must haunt you, every day of my life. They sat in silence for a moment. Why? Daniel asked finally. Why did it matter so much that she was black? That's what it was, right? That's the real reason. Yes. Catherine forced herself to look at him. I grew up in a different time. Not an excuse, just context. My world was very white, very insular. Country clubs, private schools, business circles where diversity meant having one Jewish member. I absorbed those prejudices without questioning them. Lots of people grow up that way. They don't all abandon their grandkids. You're right, the prejudice explains it but doesn't excuse it. Catherine leaned forward. The truth is, I was scared of what people would think. Scared of losing my place in a world I'd worked hard to be part of. And I was angry at Robert for defying me, at Alicia for stealing him, at the universe for taking him away. So you punished me, yes. Not consciously maybe, but yes. Catherine's voice was steady. I told myself I was too old, too busy, that you'd be better off with a younger family. But really I just didn't want to deal with the discomfort. Didn't want to face my own failings every time I looked at you. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I deserved better than that. You deserved everything. Love, stability, family. You deserved to grow up knowing your father's laugh and your mother's kindness. You deserved to be wanted. Catherine reached across the table, stopped just short of touching his hand. And I stole that from you. Not the universe, not fate, me. I made that choice and you suffered for it. Daniel wiped his eyes. I don't know how to forgive that. I don't expect you to. Honestly, I don't know if I could, in your position. But you want me to. I want you to do whatever is best for you. Catherine said firmly. If that means never speaking to me again, I'll accept it. If it means keeping me at a distance, I'll accept that too. This isn't about what I want or need, it's about what you need. Daniel was quiet for a long time thinking. I need to know more, he said finally. About them, about my family. I need to understand where I come from. I'll tell you everything I know, everything I should have told you years ago. And I need— Daniel hesitated. I need you to understand that I'm not going to just suddenly be okay with this. With you, it's going to take time. Maybe a lot of time. I understand. And you can't try to buy me. The renovations at Riverside House, those are good, and the kids needed them. But you can't throw money at me and expect it to fix things. I know, the renovations were never about you. They were about doing something I should have done years ago. Catherine paused. But I would like to help you. College applications, living expenses, anything you need, not as payment or apology, but because it's what your father would have wanted. What I should have been doing all along. Daniel considered this. I'll think about it, that's all I ask. They met again the following week, and the week after that. Slowly, carefully, they began building something fragile and new. Catherine told Daniel stories about his father, showed him home videos, gave him Robert's high school yearbooks, his college papers, the sketches he'd made when he was studying architecture. She also gave him everything she'd found about Alicia, the articles, the letters of recommendation, the thank you notes from families she'd helped. She was preparing to be a social worker, Catherine told him. Just like you want to be, really. She'd been accepted to a program at Wayne State, was planning to start after you were born. Catherine smiled sadly. You're following in her footsteps without even knowing it. Daniel stared at his mother's acceptance letter. I wish I could have asked her advice about how to do this work, how to help kids without burning out. I think you already know. You learned it from her somehow, through genetics or fate or just the universe recognizing goodness. Catherine looked at him. You give to others even when you have nothing. You're kind even when life has been cruel to you. That's all, Alicia. And Dad, the integrity, the thoughtfulness, the terrible sense of humor you're starting to show. Catherine smiled. That's all, Robert. Over the weeks Daniel's anger didn't disappear, but it became something more complicated. Grief mixed with curiosity, hurt mixed with hunger for connection. One evening they were sitting in Catherine's living room. Daniel had finally agreed to visit her home when he asked, "What happens now, with us?" "I don't know," Catherine said honestly. "What do you want to happen?" "I don't know either." Daniel looked around the room at the photos of Robert she'd put up, at the comfortable furniture, the warmth. "This is so different from Riverside House. You could live here, if you wanted. There's plenty of room." Daniel shook his head. "I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It feels too much like accepting that everything's okay now, and it's not." "I understand, but I don't want to stop talking. Stop learning about them." Daniel's voice was quiet. "They're the only family I have, or had." "You have me too, if you want." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know if I can call you Grandma. Not yet. Catherine is fine, or Mrs. Whitmore, or even hey you, whatever you're comfortable with." A small smile. "Okay, Catherine." It was a start. Spring came, bringing with it Daniel's graduation from high school. He stood in line with his classmates, cap and gown slightly too big, waiting to walk across the stage. In the audience Miss Patricia sat beside Catherine, both of them wiping tears as Daniel's name was called. Daniel Robert Thompson, graduating with honors. The applause was thunderous, louder than for anyone else. All the kids from Riverside House were there, cheering wildly. Miss Patricia had brought them all. Daniel walked across the stage, shook hands with the principal, and accepted his diploma. As he passed the microphone he paused. "Can I say something?" The principal looked surprised but nodded. Daniel stepped up to the mic. "I just want to thank some people. Miss Patricia for never giving up on any of us. Mrs. Miller, my English teacher, for believing I was smart when I didn't. Mrs. Anderson, the librarian, for giving me a safe place to study." He paused, took a breath. "And I want to thank my parents, Robert and Alicia, who I never got to meet, but who gave me life and love anyway. This is for them." In the audience, Catherine sobbed into her hands. After the ceremony, Daniel found her in the crowd. "Hey," he said, almost shy. "You were wonderful," Catherine managed. "Your father would be so proud. Thanks for coming." "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." Catherine smiled through her tears. "Can I take you to dinner, to celebrate?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but can Miss Patricia and some of the kids come too?" "They're my family too." "Of course. Wherever you want to go." They ended up at an Italian restaurant. A large table crowded with kids from Riverside House, Miss Patricia and Catherine. It was chaotic and loud and perfect. Emma sat next to Daniel, chattering about her upcoming art show. Marcus showed Catherine the math award he'd won. Little Sophia fell asleep with her head on Daniel's shoulder, watching him with the children, patient, kind, fully present. Catherine saw both her son and Alicia in him, the best of both of them surviving against all odds. "You're good with them," she said quietly, during a lull in the noise. "They're my siblings, basically. We grew up together. Still, not everyone would be so generous with their time and attention." Daniel shrugged. "Someone has to be. And I know what it's like to need someone to care." After dinner, as they were leaving, Daniel pulled Catherine aside. "I've been thinking," he said, "about college, about what comes next. And I got into University of Michigan, full scholarship. I want to go." "That's wonderful, Daniel. Congratulations, but I'm worried about the kids, about Riverside House. Who's going to help them with homework? Break up fights? Make sure the little ones are okay?" Catherine smiled. "The 2 new social workers we hired will help. And you can come back on weekends if you want. Visit during breaks." "Yeah, but Daniel struggled with something. I feel guilty, like I'm abandoning them." "You're not abandoning anyone. You're showing them what's possible, that someone from their situation can go to college, build a life. Catherine put her hand on his arm. That's more valuable than staying.
You think. I know, your success is their hope. Daniel nodded slowly. Okay, yeah. They stood in the parking lot, the spring evening warm around them. Catherine? Daniel's voice was tentative. Yes. Would you want to help me move into my dorm, in August, when school starts? Catherine's breath caught. Really? Yeah, I mean if you're not busy or whatever, I would love to, I would be honored to. Daniel smiled. A real full smile. Cool. That summer they spent more time together. Catherine took him shopping for college supplies. They had lunch every week. She taught him things his father would have taught him: how to tie a proper tie, how to manage a bank account, how to change a tire. And Daniel taught her things too: how to see people beyond their circumstances, how to really listen instead of waiting to talk, how to let go of control and trust in others' goodness. You're different than I expected, Daniel told her one afternoon. They were in her garden planting tomatoes, something Robert had loved to do. How so? I expected you to be cold, formal, disconnected. He packed soil around a seedling. But you're not. You're trying really hard. Is it working? Yeah, slowly, but yeah, I'm glad. Catherine wiped dirt on her jeans. Daniel, can I tell you something? Sure. These last few months getting to know you, they've been the best months I've had in 18 years. Since Robert died. She looked at him. You gave me back my family. My son lives on in you. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then I wish he was still here. I wish I could have known him. So do I, but I'm grateful I get to know you. They worked in comfortable silence, the sun warm on their shoulders. Catherine? Daniel said after a while. Yes. I think maybe I want to try calling you Grandma, if that's okay. Catherine's hands stilled in the dirt. Are you sure? Not completely, but I want to try. See how it feels. Then yes, I would like that very much. Okay. Daniel took a breath. Thanks, Grandma. The word felt strange and wonderful all at once. Catherine smiled through sudden tears. You're welcome, sweetheart. In August, true to his word, Daniel let Catherine help him move into his dorm at the University of Michigan. They loaded boxes together, argued about how to arrange furniture, made multiple trips to buy things he'd forgotten. His roommate was a friendly kid from Ohio named Ben who was studying engineering. They hit it off immediately. As Catherine was leaving, Daniel walked her to her car. Thank you, he said. For all of this, for trying. Thank you for giving me a chance I didn't deserve. Daniel shifted his weight, then suddenly hugged her, quick and uncertain but genuine. See you at family weekend, he asked when he pulled back. I'll be there. Catherine drove home with tears streaming down her face. Happy tears for once. Hopeful tears. They weren't perfect. Some days Daniel was still angry, still hurt. Some days he couldn't look at her without thinking about all the years she'd missed. But they were trying. Building something new from the rubble of the past, and that was enough. Daniel thrived at college. He threw himself into his studies, joined clubs, made friends. He called Catherine every Sunday evening to tell her about his week. But he never forgot where he came from. Every weekend he went back to Detroit, back to Riverside House where he helped with homework and played basketball with the kids. Back to the life he'd left but couldn't abandon. One Sunday evening call 6 months into his freshman year he said, I've been thinking about something. What's that? All these kids in the system. There are thousands of them just in Michigan, and most of them don't have anyone helping them like you helped Riverside House. That's true. So what if we changed that? What if we started something? A foundation or program that helped group homes across the state, made sure kids had what they needed. Catherine sat forward. Tell me more. They talked for 2 hours. Daniel had clearly been thinking about this deeply. He had ideas about scholarships, mentorship programs, emergency funds for necessities, support for kids aging out of the system. It's ambitious, Catherine said, but possible, if we do it right. Would you help? I mean financially, obviously, but also with the business side, setting it up properly. Yes, Catherine said without hesitation, absolutely yes. And I want to name it after them, after my parents. The Robert and Alicia Foundation, so their names mean something, so they're remembered for more than just dying young. Catherine's throat tightened. They would be so honored. They spent the next 6 months planning, Daniel researched, talked to social workers and former foster kids, identified the biggest needs. Catherine handled the legal and financial side, setting up the non-profit structure, establishing funding. The foundation launched the summer after Daniel's freshman year. The official event was held at a hotel in Detroit, attended by social workers, donors, politicians, and most importantly, kids from the foster system. Daniel gave a speech that left half the audience in tears. "My name is Daniel Robert Thompson," he began. 18 months ago I was a kid in the foster system without hope. I went to bed hungry. I wore shoes with holes. I thought nobody cared if I existed." He paused. "Then something happened. I found a wallet full of money. I could have kept it. God knows I needed it. But I didn't, because my mother, who died the day I was born, taught me to be good and kind." He told the story of meeting Catherine, the cafe, the photograph, the painful revelation. "My grandmother made a terrible mistake 18 years ago," Daniel said. "She let fear and prejudice cost her a relationship with me. She left me in the system when she could have given me a home." He looked at Catherine in the front row. "But she owned that mistake. She faced it. She didn't make excuses or try to minimize it. She said, 'I did this, it was wrong, and I want to try to make it right.' That's what this foundation is about. Not perfection, not erasing the past, but trying to make it right, trying to give kids the support they deserve. And honoring my parents, Robert Whitmore and Alicia Thompson, two people who believed everyone deserved a chance." The applause was thunderous. After the event, a young girl approached Daniel. She couldn't have been more than 10, thin and wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. "Is it true?" she asked shyly. "What you said? You were in foster care?" "Yeah, until last year. And now you're in college?" "Yep, University of Michigan." Her eyes widened. "Really, really, and you can do it too. That's what this foundation is for, to help kids like you and me." The girl's face lit up with something Daniel recognized: hope. Over the next 2 years the foundation grew. They helped 32 group homes across Michigan with funding for basics, food, clothing, repairs. They provided scholarships to 47 students. They started a mentorship program pairing former foster kids with current ones. Daniel remained involved despite his course load, reviewing applications, meeting with kids, sharing his story, and his relationship with Catherine deepened. She attended his college events. He came to her house for holidays. They had standing dinner dates every time he was home from school. It still wasn't perfect. Some days the past was too heavy, but they were family, learning how to be together. One evening during his junior year, Daniel said, "I've been thinking about what comes after graduation, and I want to run the foundation full-time. Get my master's in social work, sure, but make this my career, helping kids." Catherine smiled. "Your mother would be so proud. She wanted to be a social worker too." "I know. That's part of why I want to do it. To finish what she started. Then let's make it happen." They expanded the foundation's mission: more cities, more programs, a focus on keeping families together when possible, supporting kinship care, providing resources before kids entered the system. Daniel graduated from U of M with honors. Catherine sat in the audience, crying happy tears as he walked across the stage. Afterward, he found her in the crowd. "We did it, Grandma. You did it. I just cheered from the sidelines. You did more than that. You gave me a chance. You let me in." Daniel hugged her tight. "Thank you. No, sweetheart. Thank you for forgiving me, for letting me be your grandmother." They held each other as graduates swirled around them, celebrating their own achievements. But for Daniel and Catherine, this moment was about more than graduation. It was about healing, about family, about choosing each other despite the past, about love winning over fear. Finally, 5 years after finding the wallet, Daniel stood in front of a crowd of 500 people. He was 23 now, held a bachelor's degree and was finishing his master's in social work. The Robert and Alicia Foundation had grown beyond anything they'd imagined. Catherine sat in the front row, 79 now, her hair completely silver but her eyes sharp as ever. "Thank you all for coming," Daniel began. 5 years ago, I made a choice. I could have taken $4,500 that I desperately needed, or I could return it to its owner. I chose to return it, because my mother, who I never knew, taught me to be good and kind." He paused. "That choice led me to my grandmother, to family,
to understanding where I came from. And it led to this. He gestured to the screen behind him, showing photos of kids helped by the foundation. The Robert and Alicia Foundation has now helped over 4,000 children across 6 states. We've provided scholarships to 200 students. We've kept 300 families together who otherwise would have been separated. Applause filled the room. But numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is Emma, who came to our community center hungry and scared 7 years ago, and now volunteers in our kitchen. The real story is Marcus, who's now studying to be a teacher. The real story is every kid who thought they were forgotten discovering that someone cares. Daniel's voice grew stronger. My parents died before I could know them, but their love lives on. In me, in this foundation, in every child we help. They taught me, through their choices, through the values they held, that kindness matters, that integrity matters, that helping others matters. He looked at Catherine. And my grandmother taught me that it's never too late to make things right, that facing your mistakes takes courage, that redemption is possible if you're willing to do the work. After the event, they stood together outside the venue, watching the sunset. Your parents would be so proud, Catherine said. I hope so. I know so. Look at what you've built, what you're doing. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, Grandma, I need to tell you something. What is it? I forgive you. Catherine turned to him, her eyes wide. I've been holding on to anger for 5 years, Daniel continued, and I don't want to anymore. You made a mistake, a huge one, but you owned it. You've spent 5 years trying to make it right, and his voice caught. I don't want to waste any more time being angry. Life's too short. My parents proved that. Catherine's tears fell freely. Daniel, I forgive you, Grandma, and I love you, your family. Catherine pulled him into a fierce hug, both of them crying. I love you too, she whispered. So much. Thank you for giving me a chance to be your grandmother. They stood there as the sun set, 2 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, choosing family despite everything. That winter, Catherine got sick. It started with fatigue, then weight loss, then tests that came back with words like pancreatic cancer and stage 4 in 6 months. She told Daniel in her study, the same room where she'd first discovered the truth about him 5 years ago. No, he said immediately. No, we fight this. Treatments, trials, whatever it takes. Daniel, Catherine took his hands. I'm 80 years old. I've lived a long, full life. These last 5 years with you have been the best years. You gave me back my family. My purpose. I'm at peace. I'm not at peace with it. I need you, and I'll be here as long as I can. But when it's time, she cupped his face. I need you to let me go. Can you do that? Daniel couldn't answer, could only cry. Catherine fought for 7 months, longer than the doctors predicted. She stayed involved with the foundation as long as she could, attending meetings from her bed when she was too weak to go in. Daniel was with her constantly, taking a semester off school to care for her. You don't have to do this, Catherine told him. Hire nurses. Get help. You're my grandma. This is where I want to be. They spent hours talking about Robert and Alicia. Catherine told him every story she could remember, wanting him to have as much of his parents as possible. Your father used to sing in the shower, she said one afternoon, her voice weak. Terribly. He couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, but he'd belt out these songs with such enthusiasm. Daniel laughed through his tears. What songs? Old country songs, mostly. His favorite was Take Me Home, Country Roads. He'd sing it so loud the neighbors complained. I wish I could have heard him. He had your smile, and your stubbornness. Catherine squeezed his hand. You're so much like him, Daniel. Every day I see him in you. It's like getting a piece of him back. In her final weeks, kids from the foundation came to visit. Emma brought flowers. Marcus brought a card signed by his whole class. Teenagers whose college tuition the foundation had paid stopped by to thank her. You changed my life, a young woman named Maria told Catherine. I wouldn't be in medical school without you. Catherine smiled weakly. Not me, Daniel, and your own hard work. All of you together. Thank you. On a quiet morning in early summer, with Daniel holding her hand and sun streaming through the window, Catherine died. Daniel sat with her for a long time after, holding her hand, crying. Thank you, he whispered, for finding me, for trying, for loving me despite everything. Thank you, Grandma. The funeral was huge. Business associates, foundation staff, the kids they'd helped, hundreds of people came to pay respects to Catherine Whitmore. Daniel gave the eulogy. My grandmother made mistakes, he said, his voice steady despite his grief. She let fear and prejudice cost her 18 years with me, but when she realized what she'd done, she didn't hide from it, she faced it. She changed. She spent her final years building something beautiful from the rubble of her regrets. He looked out at the crowd. That's the lesson she taught me. Not perfection, but the courage to face your mistakes and do better. The courage to change even when you think it's too late. It's never too late to choose love over fear. The lawyer read the will a week later. Catherine had left her entire fortune, over $300 million, to the Robert and Alicia Foundation. Not to Daniel personally, to the foundation. She wanted to ensure the work continues, the lawyer explained. With proper funding you can expand across the country, help tens of thousands of kids. Daniel sat in stunned silence. There is one personal bequest. The lawyer pulled out a small box. She wanted you to have this. Inside was a locket, simple gold engraved with initials on both sides, RA and AMT. Robert Andrew Whitmore, Alicia Marie Thompson. Daniel opened it. Inside were two tiny photos. Robert on one side, young and smiling. Alicia on the other, radiant with life. She wore this every day after your father died, the lawyer said quietly. She wanted you to have it, to remember them, to remember her. Daniel closed his fist around the locket and cried. 1 year later, Daniel stood on the same corner where he'd found Catherine's wallet 6 years ago. It was snowing again, just like that day. The same cold wind, the same gray sky, but everything else had changed. The Robert and Alicia Foundation now operated in 30 cities. They'd helped over 10,000 children. Scholarships, housing assistance, mentorship, support, everything Daniel had dreamed of building. He wore the locket Catherine had left him every day, felt his parents' and grandmother's presence in everything he did. A young girl walked past, maybe 9 years old, wearing a coat too thin for the weather. She looked cold, scared, alone. Daniel recognized that look, had worn it himself for 18 years. Hey, he called out gently. Are you okay? She turned suspicious, wary. I run the community center 3 blocks that way, Daniel said, pointing. We've got hot soup and sandwiches, if you're hungry, and it's warm inside. Is it free? Completely free. Come on, I'll walk you there. She hesitated, then nodded. As they walked, Daniel told her about the center, about the programs, about how she mattered, how she deserved help just for being herself. Why do you do this? She asked. Because someone helped me once, Daniel said simply, and now I help others. That's how it works. They reached the center, the building Catherine had helped fund, named after his parents. Inside it was warm and bright, kids doing homework with tutors, families picking up food from the pantry. Life, hope, community. The girl's eyes widened. Wow, welcome home, Daniel said. He watched her walk inside, welcomed by volunteers, given food and warmth and safety. This was what it was all about. Not grand gestures or fame or fortune, just this showing up. Helping one person at a time, choosing kindness over convenience, choosing love over fear, choosing to return the wallet. Daniel pulled out his phone, looked at the photo he kept there. Robert and Alicia on their wedding day, looking at each other with pure love. Next to it, a photo of Catherine from the foundation launch, beaming with pride. I did it, he whispered to them. We did it. We built something beautiful, something that matters. He could almost hear them responding. His father, proud of you, son. His mother, be good, be kind. Catherine, thank you for giving me a chance. Daniel slipped the phone back in his pocket and headed inside the center. There was work to do, kids to help, lives to change. One wallet, one choice, one snowy afternoon. That's all it took to start changing the world. Because kindness multiplies. One person helping one kid, who grows up to help 10 kids, who grow up to help 100 kids. That's how you change the world. Daniel Thompson learned that lesson in a snowstorm when he was 18 years old, and now at 24, he was teaching it to the next generation. The cycle continuing, the ripples spreading, love winning over fear, one choice at a time.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.